That's how we own it.
What's up, family? It's your girl, Tamika D, Mallory.
It's your boy, Mysonne, the general.
We are your host of Street Politicians, the place where the streets and politics meet. How you doing, my son? We got a lot to get done today.
Listen, man, I'm doing God's work, and I'm a child of God. Shout out to my boy, Robbie Rob, for this shirt. See that? Child of God. Woo, that thing glowing. We outside.
That is very, very nice. Well, I'm glad you started talking about children because I think our first topic today is something that is it's really troubling. I wrote on my Facebook page the other day that I don't get fentanyl. I get all the drugs. You know, some of them I did when I was younger. Some of them my friends did. We hung out. People did all types of stuff. And I get it, right? Even though, of course, now at this big age, I realize we probably could have died, and or people even today who are still taking, like, I don't know, what's those drugs, ecstasy, and I don't even know if they make that stuff anymore, but the Mollies and all of that. It's a pretty dangerous mixture of a bunch of different drugs. But most people made it home alive by the skin of their teeth, but they made it home alive. Pretty bad shit, right? I know many family members and friends who were on drugs as kids or younger, teens or what have you, and they got themselves straightened out later on, maybe in their 20s or 30s, and now it's as if that thing, whatever it was, is not even there. And I will say just one thing. It is true, though, that your body does experience some shift somewhere as a result of the overuse of any kind of drug. Definitely. So people who smoke a lot of weed, that there is a mental slowdown that happens and other issues that you learn about as time goes on. And I'm sure from my drug abuse of prescription pills, I'm sure there is something that when I'm 85, I will learn there was an impact. So I don't want to make it seem like if you used it when you was young, you good now. There are people who are dealing with issues, sometimes severe, sometimes not so severe, but they do know, or they have been told at a doctor's appointment, that as a result of the use of this drug, it has impacted you in XYZ way. So all of it is bad. And all of it, we need to be real careful about what you're putting in your body, especially shit that's man-made, from the pharmaceutical companies to the street corners, right? So I just want to make that as a disclaimer. But the fentanyl thing, I don't be getting, because every time I turn around, the people are talking about their dying. So I posted on my page, I don't get fentanyl. Now, I know it is a drug that is supposed to be used for severe pain. I know that severe pain, and it's also something that is administered when someone is close to the end. So it's an end of life. And they say that when a doctor is giving it to you, for some people, it is very necessary, right? But somehow or another, it made it into the hands of Tink them, Billy Bob, and they are putting it in all kinds of other drugs and using fentanyl. And it's killing people literally left and right of all racial backgrounds.
It's like heroin, though, to me. I think it's like...
But that heroin did kill people. I'm not saying it didn't. And I'm sure there's stats somewhere that talks about how it was probably one of the worst drugs. I get it. However, in 2022, fentanyl deaths outweighed heroin, even with people using it at the same rate. 100,000 people, this is from the BBC, 100,000 people died from fentanyl use. And in the article, I was trying to understand, it might just be my ADD. Is it a small location or was it nationally? But sometimes you read these articles and it's for super smart people because they be saying things and you kind of get mixed. So I couldn't figure it out. So I sent it to somebody to tell me what I'm reading, right? But they were specifically talking about even heroin. They weren't saying heroin is good. They're saying heroin is dangerous as hell. But they are saying that fentanyl is even worse. So I listen, I know that there is the stress and the desire to get higher or lower or whatever. I hear all that. I've watched documentaries, but I'm just really trying to understand, if you are even a drug dealer, why would you want to sell
Kill,
something to the
kill the
people
people
who
that spending the
clientele
money.
is dying? I don't get that. I am confused about the fentanyl.
Now I ain't gonna lie, they got me too. I'm just as confused with heroin. All of the, like, I hear what you're saying, but to me, I never seen somebody that was on heroin look good.
It's true.
You know, I never seen them look healthy at all. I don't know how you look at somebody that's taking heroin and be like, oh shit, yeah, this is something I want to do. And fentanyl, I don't even know what somebody that takes fentanyl looks like, because most of the time you hear about them, they dead. So it's like, to me, we are in a society where it's oxymoronic. We celebrate the shit that's most dangerous to us, that's most detrimental to us. Like, we rationalize the shit that's gonna kill us. You know, I was like, yo, why would, I have posted something about Nicki Minaj and and the situation, and I was talking about it, and I said, why would two multimillionaire people be beefing with situations that can get you killed or go to jail? And the dude was like, yo, man, he said, you don't know what he said to her. I said, so you trying to tell me that there was a word that somebody said that you said, you know what, I'm gonna throw away all of these millions of dollars and my freedom and possibly my life. And you rationalize that at a big age, you're grown. Not no 15, 16, where, 13, where that makes sense to you, where you like that's the grown age, like grown people are pushing this. It's just like, to myself, it's like, I don't even understand. So it goes hand in hand with this situation. Like, in their mind, people's mind is like, I want to do the worst shit. I want to put myself close to as possible. I want to either die or almost feel like I'm dying, right? Like, it's the weirdest shit that I've ever. We at a time, like, everybody always says, yo, I've never seen nothing like this. And my mother used to say it, and now I get it. If we were anywhere like this generation and the shit that I see now, I realized why they was really confused. Because I can't even make sense of the shit. I can't make, and I pride myself on being someone who's rational, who, deals with common sense. It's like, oh, I can understand why that happened. Even though it might not be good to everybody, but I kind of understand. This shit I don't get for the life of me.
Yeah, fentanyl is really one of those things that has
That's perplexing.
And I want to give, and we should, you know what? We should interview him. Stefan Clark's brother. So, when families experience police violence or some other traumatic situation, a lot of times people think they're going to just stay on police issues. But Stefante is growing in his activism, and I see him talking more. His brother was killed by police. Just for folks who don't know, his brother was going into his grandmother's house, his grandparents' house, and he jumped over a fence. This was in California. He jumped over the fence, which is probably, grandma would be like, listen, at night, I don't have my hearing aid in or whatever. I'm being funny about that part, but I can't hear what's going on in the front. So you want to get in, you got to jump over this gate and come to the back window. That's been going on since forever. The police saw him jumping across the gate, told him, I guess, to put his hands up, which he did based upon the findings. Didn't have a weapon. They shot him to death in his grandmother's yard. Stefante, his brother, has been an activist since, his brother's passing, of course, fighting for justice for his brother, also working with other families, showing up and being a support system for people around the country. But I noticed that as of late, he has been talking a lot about fentanyl abuse and engaging in the movement to try to reduce fentanyl usage in his community and around the country. And I thought to myself, wow, for Stefante to go from what we know him for to this right here, it means that he sees a serious and desperate need to get involved in this issue. And they just dropped, Anastasia just dropped into our chat here, that fentanyl is up to 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. So to go back to the point, I'm not saying that you don't die, because I know people was on crack, they died. A lot of crackheads people who use crack, I don't know if we're supposed to call them crackheads, but people who use crack and well, whatever, they died. Cocaine addicted people who that hit messed them up, messed up their membranes, and they died. So we know that. People who smoke weed every day, the weed doesn't go well and they got sick and had internal issues and died. It's not as many, of course, of any of those things, but still it's bad. The overusage of anything or dangerous, especially man-made drugs, anything can happen. But fentanyl, they're saying, is up to 50 times stronger than heroin. 50 times? I just ain't gonna get it.
That's crazy.
You going through severe mental health issues, even though you might not know it and you may not identify with it. But if you choose to take fentanyl, which you see it on the news every day, they telling you the shit it could kill you quick, something wrong. You numbing something that is so deep, or you a child who is really misguided. I don't always understand, or I don't always take into account. I do understand the power of my influence and my platform, but I don't always take it into account sometimes when I say things. So I wrote a post because it was in my heart. And the post that I wrote was about Krishan Rock. And the reason why I wrote it publicly was because when I'm in my rabbit hole at 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning, when I can't sleep, or 1 o'clock in the morning, I will go to certain posts, certain places, and just kind of try to get a feel for what's going on in the culture. Because all day long, there's like no way to monitor comments and thoughts and look at the feed of every blog. I don't have that type of time. So I usually do that when I'm narrowing the day down. And I kept seeing, like, I cannot get Blueface and Krishan Rock off of my timeline. So no matter if I wanted to ignore it or not, it is ever present in your face all day long. Even in this day that we sit here now, from the morning until now at 1:48, there have been at least 5 to 6 posts about them. Okay, different things, what he said, what she said, what this, that, and the third, the doctor's appointment, the blah, 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 all of the stuff that's going on. And I saw it and said to myself, this is like really serious, because that baby does something, it shifts people. You know what I'm saying? When it was just the two of them, I prayed for them, God bless you, and moved on. I said, I know this is crazy. And we talked about it before. I'm like, what is Zeus? And who owns it? And what is going on? This is craziness. But I've moved on because there's an appetite for it, and nothing, all that comes of me saying that, you know, it's bad or it's wrong or whatever is a bunch of people getting frustrated and telling me to mind my business, and you don't this, and you a hater, and blah, blah, blah. So I don't have time to fight that fight. I got to stop a man from becoming governor in Kentucky. We have to do that. Yeah. So when I saw this situation with the baby, it made me feel something. And at first I felt the immediate, like, what the fuck? You know, which is judgment. It's judgment. And then what I always try to do is sit with myself for a moment, especially when I'm thinking about younger people. And I got this somewhat from you when you said you always try to think of what does the young you want to hear, or what would you have listened to? So I kind of slowed down and sat with, damn, remember this, remember that, remember in stories when I was young with my baby, I might not have been as far to the left as what you see with the two of them, but also everything looks magnified and worse when it's on social media or in front of a screen every day. Mm-hmm. Everything looks worse. So my same shit, the basements that I lived in, the craziness, the fighting with my baby father, all of the drama that I went through, if it was on TV or on social media, it would have looked very similar. The screaming, the yelling, the fighting, the carrying on with my son being there with us at times, it would have looked similar. And when I checked myself in that way, I began to write. I spoke to Yandy about it first. She was like, girl, it's been on my mind too, blah, blah, blah. And then I began to write. And so I posted it, and then it ended up on this blog and this place and that place. And I appreciate all of that support, because most of the blogs wrote that, you know, Tamika, Mallory, you know, they said positive things about it. And in the comment section, there's overwhelmingly folks who are in there that have been very, very, moved by the gesture to say that we will help in some way. And it's not financial help, but it's looking at how can we pair her with the right Black doulas that can work with her, that can help her to manage the postpartum and motherhood, and learn some of the things that she may not be able to get from, you know, her upbringing or her family or her community or whatever it is. She may never, ever, ever, Krishan, say that she wants to talk to us, and that's okay. But sometimes just knowing that people are watching and they're telling you that they care, that they will help you, that they will try to provide you with some type of support, it's enough to make you be like, damn, how do I look? You know, that these people feel the need. And we're not talking about just you, all these people in the comment section like, oh, she said y'all is broken, this and that. Yeah, that's because it's toxic people all having a conversation at one time. You telling us she ain't shit, and she telling you you broke and so and saying whatever dirty things that she can say to deflect from what she feels. It's a total different thing when you, and you know why I know? Because the first place she took her baby was to church. Days later. That means that somewhere inside is a young girl who is really crying out for help, who really knows that I'm so far to this side, but I really need somebody to help me with this baby and help me with me. Now, I also understand, and I'm done with it, but I also understand that there are people who will say, all she really wants is her man to act right. And I've been there. I've been through that. I've been through that. You just want the man that you want to be with or feel is, you know, your savior, all of this, or the healing to your soft and painful spots to come. It's like a drug. It's almost like fentanyl. That's what you want, is for, you think that that's going to heal the problem. But it took strong women to be around me. And I mean strong women, I'm not talking about some chicks I know, or just because it's a family member, it makes that person qualified. A family member don't necessarily make you qualified to help somebody through their challenges when you're suffering with your own. But when you surround yourself with strong women and men who can help you see other perspectives without judging you and or going back to the world and blasting your most vulnerable spaces and places and exploiting you. Because by the way, many of the people who she works with and talks to are exploiting her pain and her baby father's pain for their own purposes, regardless of whether she puts it on social media. So I'm very passionate about it. I have no expectations, and I don't have to, because the world is going on, that this, young woman will hopefully, and I believe that she will. I have to believe that. Like, we have to live in a society where we believe that there is healing even for Krishan, even for a person who might not even know, understand, or feel they need support. I have to live in that world. And there are people who, many of them, and I don't even think they're wrong, their quick, immediate responses, you want to help this chick instead of, because she's a celebrity, instead of all these other people that need help. And let me tell you why that's important to me, or why I understand the question And I have a very specific answer. I already told people about all the work that I do with folks you ain't never seen or heard of, and the support of our village around young people who are having issues, challenges, young mothers, so on and so forth. If I wanted to, I could call the rolls. Some of them don't want that. Others who may want, who do want, because they say it all the time. But because Krishan is a celebrity, she's the reason why I was posted. It wasn't about me. It's not like, oh, people are constantly posting on all of these blogs and in other places, everything we do. They post some things for me. They don't post the things that you talk about often enough. And we know that, and we've challenged that. But they do post some of my work. They post my comments or things that I've said at times. But there are not many opportunities because, number one, the comment section or even the response from the people, if you will, is not even the same. So most of the sites, the blog sites or whatever, they are posting things where they know there's going to be interaction. And if they're just putting up that Tamika Mallory is working with college students and helping them, more than likely, even the same people who are challenging why I don't help young women, which I do, or young mothers, other mothers that are not celebrities, you ain't got nothing to say. You ain't in the comment section celebrating that, sharing it, giving comments. That's not the case. We don't engage in that kind of stuff. So the reason why it's getting the attention that it's getting is because of who she is and the fact that you all are already tapped into her. But let me say this last thing, and I'm done with it. One thing I know about life, right, and capacity is that we don't always have the type of capacity that we want to do everything we want to do. And it's often frustrating. But Krishan's healing has the potential to heal millions. So if she becomes an example, sometimes we're not able to work on 70, 80, 100,000 people because we don't have the capacity to do so. But if you can work on one individual that appears to be at her bottom or at her lowest moment, which I don't even believe that that's true, because there's always lower until you are under the ground, literally. And I believe that if she can find healing, whether it's about me or not, just in her own ways, it has the potential to spread to millions of young women and men everywhere and show them that there is a path for redemption, even though you might be in the worst situations, the worst toxic relationships, you might be most toxic to yourself. There is a path for grace and for there to be redemption for you. So that's all I have to say. I know it's a lot, but I think people need to know that no, I'm not going to let you make me feel like I shouldn't do or somebody else is more worthy. I think all of us, even Krishan, is worthy of love and support.
Ain't really much for me to say after you said that. That's pretty much what it is, man. I think we all deserve grace. I think a lot of us, we look from a hierarchy, like you say. We look from where we are instead of where we've been. And when you start to judge somebody from your evolved self, then you're giving a poor judgment because you're not even thinking about the reality of what that individual is probably dealing with, especially if you actually had to deal with that. A lot of us come from this hierarchy. They come from this moral high ground about, oh, you can't do this, and you're this, and you're the worst type of person, and you're this. Look at what you've done. Look at what you've done. Not acknowledging that we've done worse shit ourselves. Right. And somebody cared for us, and somebody loved us, and somebody walked us through that. Somebody stood by us at our worst times, and we want people to just forget everybody during their worst times because we figured it out, and I think that's what we deal with a lot in this society, especially in these times. Everybody's comes from a moral high ground that they don't really have the right to come from.
Yeah, that's right. We're not perfect people, but it's perfect work.
That's right.
So now we're going to bring on our guest because listen, America's going to shit. And I mean, it's already, some people would say it's already, things is pretty rough. And, I've been working and in the process of doing some more stuff on these companies that are hiding in plain sight. And Panini was one of them. In the last few weeks or the last few months, we found out that Panini a company, a $3 billion company that uses the faces and images of Black and brown players, sports players, were making through their memorabilia and their trading cards, didn't have any Black people in positions of power in their company, no senior level executives. And so they have hired someone now to consult with them to make changes within the company. But it's been enough months, I believe, that we should now, especially the summer is over, we're into the fall, or it's coming up. Yeah, we're into the fall. We should be able to receive feedback from them about what has happened. As there, again, same thing like Krishan. I might not be able or have the capacity to go after 70 companies at the same time, but we can sure enough make sure one company is an example of how we will expose what they are doing. Again, they're hiding in plain sight. It's not like you can't find these things out. You just need a quick search and ask some questions. And when we did that, we found out that this company was really doing something that I believe is bad business practice. And so, we will continue to work on that. And now we're going to reach back out to them to find out what is the update since from our work. Because until we raised the issue with Panini, they did not have a consultant working with them on diversity, equity, and inclusion practices within their company.
Bottom line, they didn't have no Black people. There was no Black people.
But they had Black people working
on
the lower tiers of the company.
On the assembly line, of course. Right. You don't got nobody that's running the shots, calling the shots. That's and you right. Got the main faces and memorabilia you selling come from Black people. It don't even make sense. We always say ain't nothing about us without us.
That's right. And so, until we spoke up, there was zero happening. And now they have a consultant. So we'll see what that consultant has accomplished with their company, because we certainly want a response, right? That's so right. We want to update. We don't just, y'all might not hear about it, but there's always wheels still turning on the things that we're working on.
That's a fact.
So let's bring our next guest on so he can talk about DEI, because I don't think people really understand what's happening. There's an all-out assault. It's really serious.
They trying to get Trump back, 51-42. It's tough out here, man.
They don't poll all of our people. I don't even pay attention to those polls. Anyway, my son is referring to a poll that came out yesterday saying Trump has edged Biden out, and whatever. I don't believe
Shaun King don't usually post fake news, man.
Well, I don't think he posts fake news. The article
says a pretty reliable source.
The article itself is correct in whatever it has stated, but the problem is that
they're not polling the right people.
It has not been done across a large enough scale of individuals, because ain't nobody never polled me. Now, I don't really answer my house phone, because the last time I answered my house phone was some woman calling my phone, some crazy person telling me why she hate me, and I don't even know how she got my phone number. So I don't answer my phone. Tesla told me don't ever answer the phone again. And so I don't. But when I was answering my phone, it wasn't nobody calling to poll me at all. Okay, so now listen, y'all, we got somebody super, super smart on here today that knows a lot. And, lately we've been talking about DEI and the challenges around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think people really need to be paying attention to how, just because it's not on the TV every day, doesn't mean that there's not something spreading across this nation that is really, really, really dangerous. And we've got to be aware that right now being Black in certain spaces is not sexy. And people are actually trying to diminish our value and our worth. And so this gentleman that is coming on with us today is a new friend to Street Politicians, but he also is someone who is very, very qualified to talk about diversity and equity and inclusion. So let me usually I don't read bios to y'all, but I got a few sentences that I think, right, my son, that we should probably go over today. So you'll know more about who Dr. Shaun Harper is. He holds the Clifford and Betty Allen Chair in Urban Leadership at the University of Southern California. In 2022, he was appointed university professor. Dr. Harper has published 12 books and is author of more than 100 peer-reviewed articles and other academic publications. He is a recipient of dozens of top honors in his field and 4 honorary degrees. A prolific and energizing speaker on a range of diversity, equity, and inclusion topics, he has delivered hundreds of keynote addresses around the world, many audiences comprised of thousands in his DEI work. I mean, I think that is something to be really, really proud of. As a Black man, you're working in this space, and also right now to be tuned into what you do. So why don't you get started? First of all, welcome to Street Politicians, Dr. Shaun Harper. Why don't you get started by telling us about your upbringing, the things that are not here in your bio, and how you made it to the DEI space?
Sure. But before I do that, let me do 2 quick things that are really important. First, express my sincerest gratitude to you for having me as a guest. You mentioned that I'm a new friend, but honestly, already it feels like we're old friends. So I'm looking forward to a great conversation. I did want to go back and revise something you said, though, about being Black isn't always sexy. Please, says who? Being Black is sexy for me every day in every space. There's nothing I would rather be than Black. Hence, it really frustrates me, right? The palpable, pervasive, perverted sense of anti-Blackness that we see in, just about every corner of America. But, despite those attacks on our Black lives and Black selves, we're going to keep being Black unapologetically, and we're going to keep making Black sexy. So you asked about my upbringing. I grew up in Thomasville, Georgia. It's a small, rural, racially segregated town on the Georgia-Florida border. It is a place where the racial politics are ever present and incredibly intense, but yet nobody really talks about them, at least not out loud. People talk, within their family units, perhaps within their church communities, but there's never really a multiracial conversation about, just the crazy racism that plays itself out, in plain sight. So those were the things that got me really interested as a youngster, really. I mean, honestly, I think back to when I was like 5 years old, I noticed that most of the people who were Black, like my family, were incredibly poor. And most of the people who were rich and who ran things and who were in charge of things were white. So I've been on a lifelong quest to understand why those racial inequities exist. I ruled out several things. I ruled out that we weren't poor because we were lazy. My mother cleaned white people's homes as a housekeeper when I was a kid. So it definitely wasn't because we were lazy. I also ruled out that we were not poor because we wanted to be. And I ruled out that we were not poor because we were somehow inferior intellectually to white people. There were a deeper set of structural and systemic explanations. So, for the past 48 years, I've been on a quest to find those answers and more importantly, provide solutions, not just to Thomasville, where I'm from, but really to the whole United States of America and really to every place around the globe where anti-Black racism exists.
So during the murder of George Floyd and, the multiple protests and the daily outrage, everybody wanted to be involved in diversity, equity, and inclusions. There was an uprise, billions of dollars poured in. I want to do that. Do you see that same support or anywhere near close to it? Because I don't feel it. I felt like that was a moment that everybody wanted to be, I'm with the Black people. And now it's just like they're trying to go back to business as usual.
Man, that moment lasted for 7 weeks at most. At most, right? So you are absolutely right. Following Derek Chauvin's murder of George Floyd, as protests ensued across America and around the globe, we saw lots of corporations and the people who lead them do all sorts of performative gestures to declare that Black Lives Matter, you are absolutely right that collectively businesses pledged more than $200 billion in the name of George Floyd and in the name of racial justice. Notice I said pledged. So you asked if that same intensity is still there from June 2020? Nah, not only is the intensity not there, but those people also haven't paid up. They haven't paid the $200 billion that they pledged. You see, the thing about a pledge is that, you know, you make it usually over like some time span, right? So for most of these companies, they were like, yeah, over the next 4 years, we're going to give $100 million to Black folks and to Black things. Yeah, at this point, we're about 3.5 years in, and like the money still hadn't reached the accounts of Black people, of Black organizations, Black communities. So I'm waiting on the money that was pledged to be paid.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I think that we know it, right? Because we have a small grassroots organization that is constantly raising funds, and we feel it. We see that it is, and not that we were ever a group that took a lot of corporate money, corporate dollars, but what we know, and why I used the word sexy earlier, is not because it's sexy or not to me, because I think we're more than sexy. We're euphoric. We're whatever it is, the top feeling that you could have. Black folks give that. But what I mean by it is that the energy in the room, the space, it is not about focusing on Black folks the way that it was just so many years ago, which makes it so much harder for us to continue to put us back in the center of the conversation. Every time they try to rear in a different direction, we have to constantly bring it back. And what happens in those moments is that when corporations and the media and others are not covering us, even the dollars that we depend on, which is generally successful people, people who have resources to give because they feel inspired by the moment, that moment has diminished. And it is even other Black people who have resources that it's like pulling teeth to get support from them. And so I agree with you 100%. So tell us this, are there, since 2020, are there companies that you can continue to work with that you see their commitment has been something real, and, you know, so a way that they're truly focused on this? Because I got to ask you about all this, the Black folks leaving DEI positions in these companies. But first, tell me, do you know any good companies? Because they'll say we never talk about the good stuff.
Yeah, listen, I am a person who very much amplifies the goodness and attempt to learn from, scalable, adaptable, replicable models of success. I think if you had asked me this question 15 months ago, I would have had a very different response for you. I would have been able to name at least one. I can no longer do that because honestly, I can't wait till we get to the part about the Black folks and other people of color departing these DEI positions. I got a lot to say about that. But honestly, companies that in my heart and soul felt so committed, I was like, this is it. Like, this is great. Even they have fallen victim to, I suppose, that suggests that something happened to them, as opposed to them consciously deciding not to be courageous. But even those companies have walked back many of their DEI commitments and have began to unravel the DEI infrastructure. So no, I don't have a name for you, unfortunately. It's sad. It's real sad because so many companies profited reputationally from these declarations that they were making about how committed they were to Black folks. Again, that stuff lasted in most places for a maximum of 7 weeks. Our brother Van Jones gave us language for this. I'm gonna take us all the way back when Donald Trump was elected president. It was Van Jones who tearfully said live on CNN that what we're seeing here is white lash. Mm-hmm. To the 8 years of the Obama administration. Mm-hmm. in a very like pornographically analogous way, what we're seeing right now in the attacks on DEI is white lash to the progress that was made in summer 2020. You know, it was less than 3 months after George Floyd's murder that Donald Trump issued an executive order banning DEI trainings in government agencies and in the military, right? Now, I was on the team that helped Biden and Harris get elected. And part of our work, I was on the education policy team. The thing that was super important to us was on day one, a President Biden has to undo that executive order that Trump signed, right? Because it was having a chilling effect on DEI in education. We succeeded. On day one, President Biden rescinded that executive order. But at that point, the damage was already done, right? The strategy of unraveling all of this stuff, all of the momentum the trap had been set. The strategy had already been enacted.
They say the fly was already in the flower.
Exactly.
Already in there. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So here we are, years later, right? That same playbook is still being passed around from state to state, community to community, attacking diversity, equity, inclusion, and Black folks.
I see all the work you've done. What are you doing any work around what Governor DeSantis is doing in Florida? You know, the Black History ban on, the knowledge of slavery in the books in Florida. Are you doing any work around that?
Every day. So here at the University of Southern California, I'm a faculty member in 2 schools, education and business. So in my education work, I'm working with literally thousands of educators in any given week on these very issues, helping them to understand that there is a politicized, attack on Black folks, on Black history, on people of color, on queer people, and so on. And that, Ron DeSantis, Greg Abbott, the Texas governor, and others are succeeding in making the American people fall for the okie doke. The okie doke that things are actually happening in schools that are not happening, right? So yeah, I'm on this. I'm on it every single day. Earlier this summer, back in June, the USC Race and Equity Center, the organization I lead, launched what we call the National DEI Defense Fund. And we're using that as a fundraising mechanism to help buy books in communities where books have been banned, to help support teachers who are very generously creating after school and out of school programs where they can teach Black history and other things that have been banned in the formal curriculum. It's a whole bunch of other stuff that we're using the funds for. It's just one of at least 100 ways that my center colleagues and I are attempting to save our democracy from the ridiculousness.
What do you think the results will be of the rollback of DEI and the attacks that we see on information and education about Black history and Black studies and Black life?
I can make at least 3 predictions quite comfortably. First is there are going to be a whole bunch of miseducated Americans. Some of them are going to be Black folks, but the overwhelming majority of them are going to be white people and people who are not Black, who live in segregated communities, who don't have a lot of access to Black culture and Black people. We're going to send millions and millions and millions of miseducated people into our industries, into our workforce, and they are going to create cultures that are anti-Black. They are going to not hire and promote Black people equitably, right? So it's going to have a real negative impact on Black professionals for sure. That's one. Second, it's going to lead to a whole bunch of racial tension as people of color and white people are on, two different sides of the American experience. And one side consistently misunderstands the experiential realities of the other. That other side is going to get increasingly frustrated by those misunderstandings, by the devaluation of our lives and our experiences. You see, when people don't learn about each other's cultures, histories, and realities, right, it makes them susceptible to eruption and misunderstandings, right? So that's my second prediction. The third prediction that I'll make is that I honestly believe that our democracy as a whole is going to be susceptible, vulnerable to all sorts of attacks, both domestic and foreign. I know that I'm talking like I'm like speaking to a group of military officers. Well, actually, it's because just last week I spoke to hundreds of military officers, and I reminded them of the military oath of office that includes language of them pledging themselves to protect America against enemies, both foreign and domestic. The most dangerous domestic enemy right now in the United States of America is misinformation and disinformation. Those things are only going to be exacerbated by these attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Those attacks that are fueled by disinformation and misinformation. So it is really going to make our country weak and really susceptible to all sorts of breakdowns and attacks.
Mysonne.
No, go ahead, ask the other question, because I'm gonna end up with the.
Oh, okay, cool. When you say attacks, I mean, I think about, while we have not heard the reasons why Rosalind Brewer left Walgreens as CEO, and I don't know all of the reasons why. So there's been this mass exodus, if you will, of Black executives and other people of color in DEI positions and other leadership positions within companies. But I have to imagine that somewhere in there feels like people are being fired without maybe saying it publicly, just by the way that they feel marginalized at work, or maybe it's a lack of support that they are also feeling in the environment. So what do you think is causing people to run, and or are they just being terminated and we just don't hear much about how it ends?
Yeah, so I've thought about both of these. I write for Forbes, and I've written a pair of Forbes articles on, both parts of the question. So I still don't yet know the reason why Rosalind Brewer left Walgreens. What I will say, though, right, is that sister had been CEO of that company for such a short time period. And I mentioned in my Forbes article that the same thing happens in college and professional sports to Black coaches, Black head coaches, that they get less of a runway to build their team, to show results, so on and so forth, before they're pushed out or fired or whatever. So there is a chance that is part of the Rosalind Brewer experience. We got to find out from her, right? She needs to speak for herself, right? But I think the larger point is that Rosalind Brewer was one of only 2 Black women Fortune 500 CEOs. That's not okay. That's not okay, right? So we got to understand the intersectionality of race and gender for Black women, and the ways in which that intersectionality undermines their day-to-day experiences within corporate environments, but also undermines their climbing of the corporate ladder. And then ultimately, when they get there to the top, right, the attacks and the unreasonable expectations on them that are not placed on, certainly not on their white male colleagues or counterparts, right, who are CEOs. Now, with the diversity officers, chief diversity officers, I wrote a piece in Forbes back in January explaining 12 ways in which CEOs and companies fail chief diversity officers. You know, it really is the combination of those 12 factors that explains in largest part the turnover in the CDO role. We ain't got time for me to talk about 12, so I'll just like lift up 3. One of these is not like the other in many companies. So in many companies, the chief diversity officer is, if I'm being honest, and I don't mean to disrespect our brothers and sisters and genderqueer colleagues and family members who are in those roles, but they don't have the same seat at the table as the CFO. Absolutely. Or as the chief marketing officer, so on and so forth, the chief legal officer. In fact, in way too many organizations, I suppose I should say, in way too few organizations, they ain't got a seat at the corporate table at all, right? They have like a vice president title, they're called the chief diversity officer, but they never, ever, ever get to talk to the CEO, right?
Well, so they talk to them. They talk to them because my friends are DEI, are chief diversity officers. When there's a problem, they absolutely talk to them. The rest of the time, they don't really get to interface with leadership at all. So they do talk to them. Whenever Black people are upset or there's some issue with the community that the company is trying to serve, oh, here comes, we need to meet. And then, as you said, the expectations at that point of the DEI person to be able to do something for the company's brand that is not a part of anything in the culture is unreasonable, So go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah. I think 2 things are simultaneously true. I totally rock with you and, totally honor your friend's experience that in some situations, you're right. Like the CEO only relies on the chief diversity officer in a moment of a crisis. But I have way, way, way too many examples where companies have literally been on the news, and I'm talking like in the New York Times, on CNN, and other places, on fire for, some sort of racial problem or sexual harassment problem or whatever. And the CDO is not at the table. The CDO finds out when the rest of us finds out, right? And the person's like, hello, you got a whole in-house expert here that you don't even have enough respect for to call to the crisis resolution table. So I do know for sure that both things are simultaneously true. Let me go a little bit faster. So I promised people 3. Let me tell you 2 more reasons. Chief diversity officers often have way too little money in their budgets, way too few staff members, and way too little authority, decision-making authority. Folks are like, yeah, I fell for it. I thought I was like going to be an actual vice president. And I came here and, it's just like me and two staff members for a massive corporation. Here's the third explanation. In summer 2020, lots and lots of CEOs and other C-suite executives contacted me directly, personally, given the work I do, saying, hey, we want to think about hiring our first chief diversity officer. In almost every instance, I told those folks, no, don't do that. Y'all just bandwagoning. You're just doing the thing right now that is popular, that everybody else seems to be doing. But, a lot of those folks rejected that advice and went ahead and very haphazardly hired chief diversity officers without an actual job description, without an actual real, sort of complex understanding of what we want this person to do, hired the people without onboarding them properly, so on and so forth. So it shouldn't surprise us that so few of those people lasted for more than 18 months.
Right. That's true.
That's real. So when I want to close with asking this question, because we realize, you know, diversity and inclusion and equity is a big issue in the Black community, in you know, in workspaces, in school spaces, and educational spaces, all those spaces. Do you notice that there are a lot of other races, or do you work with people who from other races who are dealing with the same issues? And if so, do you think it is in comparison or even worse?
Well, so at the USC Race and Equity Center, we pride ourselves on focusing on all dimensions of diversity, equity, and inclusion, right? Race is foremost for us. It's at the epicenter of our work, but we also obviously do tons of work on homophobia and heterosexism and transphobia and Islamophobia and anti-Semitism and sexism and misogyny and misogynoir, so on and so forth. So I just want to make sure that your listeners recognize that I'm a multifaceted DEI expert. So too are the 29 people who work at the center that I lead. In terms of other racial groups, I'm really glad you asked this question, right? Because we've talked a lot in this conversation, in this episode, about Black people and Black professionals. Latinx or Latino or Hispanic professionals also experience tremendous racism in workplaces. About a month or two ago, I was watching Eva Longoria's film Flamin' Hot, which is, you know, a screenplay, a film about the Latino guy, janitor, who had the idea for Flamin' Hot Cheetos, right? So, you know, I was thinking, yo, this is going to be just like a little fun movie. But actually, as I watched that movie and I watched Richard Montañez's experience as a Latino janitor, so much of it resonated with my research and what I hear from Latino professionals about their workplace realities. So I wrote a Forbes article about it that night, because really it was such a familiar experience to me as I watched it play out in Eva's film. And let me also just say quickly, for our Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Indigenous brothers and sisters and genderqueer people in workplaces, those folks experience tremendous erasure. Meaning just like an ever-present feeling of unimportance. And it's not just a feeling, right? There are everyday reminders that, no, y'all ain't important here, right? And that's not okay. We often talk about the underrepresentation of Black and Latino folks in executive level roles in organizations. Asian Americans are also severely underrepresented. So too are Indigenous professionals.
Absolutely. Well, let me say, we have to go and let you go so we can honor your time as well. But what I will say is that it seems to me, and sometimes for Black folks who are going through hell, it's hard to hear that there are other people, groups, also experiencing some of the same things that we go through. And of course, because you're a Black man and two of us are also Black people, it hits us. We know, we feel it. But as you said, we're at the intersection of many communities. You got youth that are also locked out of many positions around this nation, where, you know, younger people being able to get into these companies and make the salaries that they deserve. I mean, there's so many layers of issues, because the bottom line is that white men have created an environment that they want to maintain within their companies, their corporations, that they've used so many people who are Black, brown, and others to build. And so it would seem to me that we would all be working together, right? Like that is the metropolis, if you will, of folks that need to be pushing back against this, and not so much being in our silos. Seems like it should be something that's bigger, but that is often not the case, because there is so much divisiveness in our movements. But I think that we get a bigger bang for our buck, if you will, if we are able to join together to push back on some of these narratives and to make sure that we're holding the line within these companies to provide opportunities for others.
Absolutely. Look, I know we got to wrap the episode, but I want to quickly take two things that you just said and amplify them, right? Absolutely. We need solidarity and coalitions across racial and ethnic lines, right? We need the people of color to come together in support of each other's interest and advancement, not just within our own individual community. So you're spot on. We also need some white allies and some white folks to also join us, right, in those interracial coalitions. The other thing that you said that I think this is such an important way to end. I want to end on a beautiful note, but honestly, this is a painful note to end on because it's just important for listeners to understand this. I, over the course of my career, have had the privilege of working with more than 400 companies, government agencies, nonprofit organizations, and educational institutions on diversity, equity, and inclusion, more than 400. One of the most painful discoveries of mine is that Black folks are catching hell everywhere. Everywhere, across sectors, across geographies, across age groups, so on and so forth. So in addition to those interracial coalitions with other racial groups, we also need Black folks to come together across industries, across age groups, to collectively heal from the collective trauma that we've experienced historically and contemporarily at work, to share navigational strategies with each other as deliberate acts of self-care, and to collectively determine strategies for resistance, regardless of where one works, to disrupt and dismantle racism and anti-Blackness. We need Black folks across industries to come together for that.
Well, the first thing Black folks have to know is that the problem exists, right? Because so many people are head down in grocery bills, gas bills, rent bills, dealing with their community issues. DEI, that concept is like, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's like it's the last on the average person's list. You know, they just trying to get a regular paycheck, and they deal with, a lot of people in our communities have normalized racism. They don't even see it as racist. It's part of the norm. They're like, what do you mean? So what? I know we can't do this. We're not supposed to do this. He's going to say this to me. I know the white girl's going to be able to do the stuff I can't do. So I have to move. We have normalized abnormalities inside of this culture. So unfortunately, until we stop normalize being treated wrong, until we understand that there has to be a unified front in which we address this, first we got to unify within us, and then we unify with everybody else. So,
yeah, I think that's right. So we've definitely normalized, but we've also individualized, right? I mean, as Black folk, we tend to be a collective people, but when these things are happening to us at work, we're thinking, this is just happening to me.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
We got to make space, right, for Black professionals, especially, to hear that, no, sis, it ain't just you. Like, this is a full-scale attack on Black women that happens to
that's why you're here. And that's why we want to put this episode out there. And I think that you need to come back, because this issue, I know, I feel it, I think about it every day. We deal with so many smoke and gun problems. You know, someone was killed, this happened in that governor's race or whatever. But DEI is sitting on me heavy, because I know that if we think we're dealing with poverty now, if we think we're dealing with challenges now, when AI becomes even more of a corporate strategy that they begin to use, we're going to see violence and crime and depression rise in our communities like we have never, ever, ever, ever seen before. This is about to be a time that we can't even manage if we don't understand the problem. And I think it is incumbent upon those of us who have our ears to the streets someone like Mysonne and I, who might not be well versed in all of it, but being able to meet and talk with people like you who can help break it down in bite sizes so that our people who are moving fast, who are stressed, who are all the things, have an opportunity to grasp that the problem you're having at work with this white woman that continuously writes you up and continuously treats you bad and, you know, continuously gets you in corners and steals your work and lies on you, all of that is not a problem just because there's something wrong with you, but there's something wrong with the industry. And to Mysonne's point, until we work together, we're never going to be able to change it. So thank you very much for joining us on Street Politicians today, Dr. Harper.
Have me back anytime. We
Yeah.
are new old friends.
We might have to be a regular. We might have to bring you up here and talk about all the situations.
We might need
Anytime.
you once a month if that's, you know, we should talk about it. Thanks a lot. Thanks for joining us.
Appreciate you, King. Thank you.
Appreciate y'all.
Shout out to Dr. Harper, man. What he said is so much real. You know, we deal with so much racism in this country. And like I said, we've normalized. And the way he broke it down is in sectors and how each individual thing plays a part. And people don't think that. And how, you know, the elimination of diversity, equity, inclusion is going to be an even bigger problem, because we think we ain't got jobs now, then they definitely going to not have jobs because they don't have no reason to give you a job. They're not forced. Like people think, oh, affirmative action. No, these things only made sure that people who were qualified got opportunities. It wasn't, they didn't bring unqualified people and say, oh yeah, you got a 60, you know, you got a C minus. No, they took the top of the barrel from communities of people who weren't able to afford and gave them education. That's what these things provided. And that's what DE does. It gives people who are qualified the opportunity to actually get heard. And then it says there's a certain amount of these people that are overly qualified that you actually have to hire. And I don't understand why people think that's such a big thing, but you know, that's a whole nother thing, man. Shout out to Dr. Harper. You know, his take on that is phenomenal, and I think we definitely should have him back. But having that be said, it brings me to my I don't get it. I posted something on social media the other day, and it was a young boy who was 15 years old, and judge, who's actually a black lady, was sentencing him for doing I think it was armed robbery, stealing cars, walking up with guns and stealing cars. He was actually ultimately sentenced to about 30 years in prison. And there were so many people like, that's good. He need to be in jail. Lock him up. This and that and this and that. And I was listening, and you know, and I understand a lot of people think people need to be held accountable. There is accountability, right? But there's two things that I thought about, right? The first thing that I thought about is that people think that there are people who think that this 15-year-old is unredeemable, that this action he's done makes him unfit to be in society, that he's just gonna be out here, he can't turn it around, he just needs to be in jail for 30 years. And I said to myself, I know people who've literally committed crimes that are heinous, that have robbed people, that have stolen people and got away, that are CEOs of companies now, that are CEOs of businesses now, that never did those things again, that run corporations, who are millionaires and billionaires, that sit in these rooms every day. They didn't get caught. There's so many people whose stories, especially that come from our communities, who they just didn't get caught. It's not that they didn't do these crimes. It's not that they were poverty stricken. Poverty is, you know, people don't look at, when you look at robbery, it is a crime of poverty, right? It is a
lot of sometimes.
9 out of 10 times people rob people because they don't have things that they want. There's very rarely that somebody who is able and willing, has the resources to buy things that they want, just rob somebody at gunpoint. I think I've never heard somebody say, oh, this person come from a well-to-do family, they got a bunch of money, and they robbing somebody at gunpoint. I've seen people.
Well, it just depends on what type of robbery we're talking about. But if you're talking about street crime.
Yeah, I'm talking about regular street crime where people are armed robbing and they stealing and taking items and carjacking. That's not a thing that comes from somebody who just wants to rob. That's usually because a person lacks the resources. right? So when we talk about those things, a lot of people come from those realities, right? And I just didn't understand it. Then the second thing I said to myself was, if a young boy has 30 years in prison, right? If we don't think that they are redeemable at 15, if we don't think that we can sit there, there's no alternative to violence. If we look in different communities, if we look in different people, places,
Alternative to violence.
I mean, alternative to incarceration, right? If we look around this world, the reality of incarceration is not working, right? We incarcerate people at higher rates than just about everybody, and we still have higher crime rates, right? It's places around this world where they don't incarcerate people nowhere near as much as we do in America, and they have lower crime rates, right? And if you look at the situation, if you look at the places where these crimes have come from, they're usually where poor people, right? And they're usually Black and brown people are the people that they locking up. And it's so confusing to me that we see these people from our communities that really think that this is the best course of action, that giving this 15-year-old boy 30 years is the best course of action. And it's so mind-boggling to me how we don't understand how it hasn't worked. You know, the experiment of incarceration, I believe there should be accountability. I believe there should be some level of, you know, maybe he does some jail time, but 30 years, what you pretty much done is made him a hardened criminal. You kept him in prison around people who are criminal-minded. He's learning criminal mentality even worse. He comes out here with less opportunities, less access to anything. He's 40-something years old with nothing. And now you expect him to become a constructive and a productive member of society. It just doesn't make sense to me. And it's our people. And that's why when people get mad and say, yo, Joe Biden wrote the crime bill, I have to really push back and say, I get it. It was the worst shit ever. But a lot of our people wanted that crime bill. It was our people in the community that said, lock them people up. They the worst shit. Get them up. And this is what happens when you look at when you go online and you see the responses of all these people saying, put this little boy in jail for 30 years.
Doing it. We're gearing up as a community. We're gearing up as a community for a crime bill to come down again. Because we are pushing, and I'm talking about from elected officials and leaders and pastors and people with influence, all the way to folks on social media, which is a mixture of people who we know and people who are acting like they're us and they're not. We are gearing up towards another crime bill type of situation around violence interruption and drugs and what have you. I would say that what you are speaking to right now, yes, I think it's important for you to keep saying it, but I don't think many people who are the ones who are pushing back against what you're saying, or those who are just basically saying lock him up, I personally don't think that they will ever get it or shift their mindset to understand that the people you're talking about who wanted the crime bill in whatever year that was, those people didn't want a crime bill. They wanted to be safe. And we've been taught that punishment, which is, what is the word that y'all use? You taught me the word.
Which word are you talking about?
Punitive punishment.
Yeah.
Punitive punishment is the only answer. We have not been taught to advocate for stronger communities to deal with violence, drugs, and other issues that relate to poverty. We've been taught that the immediate response is to go towards law enforcement and, again, punitive measures. That is a result of being enslaved. And in enslavement, if you did something, no matter what it was, you could just suck your teeth and get slapped, beat, locked away, raped. We still carry that mindset. It has been taught to us. When we went to Africa, we learned about the villages. And it does not mean that if someone committed an egregious act in the village, that there was not war, fights, and punishment that existed. But that was not the way of raising children, beating them. And the first thing that comes to mind is, what is the harshest response that you can have to the things that young people or all people do that's wrong? And we've been disconnected from our culture so much that we don't even know what it looks like to be a community that takes a child who looks challenged and try to work on dealing with their issues among ourselves. It doesn't mean that there should not be consequences, but we jump to consequences before even finding out what are the circumstances. So we are beyond, it's the same thing with the Krishan Rock thing. We are beyond circumstances and already at consequences. That's the way in which we have been taught. And it is something that, you know, it's a chain that's been around our necks for a long time, that even you, all of us fall into sometimes believing that, oh, you disrespected me, so now I'm gonna lash out in these different ways. And it is an unlearning that we're all trying to do, to say, or not we all of it, I mean in our space and Until Freedom, we're trying to unlearn that, where we can actually have communication or understanding that puts us, it makes us uncomfortable, but it's necessary. So, you know, I don't think those people will change from that because they don't know, because they have not, well, let me say, again, going back to Krishan, it's not that they don't know, because they've been, many of them, given grace. Carly Russell, same situation. People want grace for the Pookie, Ray Ray, and their family members, TT and Lily.
They want to free JoJo. They free my grandson. Please let my grandson come home.
But please, they want to pay Carly. And the grandson shot somebody. Yep. And the person was harmed, and they still want there to be grace for those.
But the crazy things to me is that, another thing I want to say is, there are people who have committed murder that they let. I was in the courthouse, you know, for my friend the other day, and it was like 6 different murder cases where they knew the people committed murder, and they let them say, look, we'll give you 20 years. We'll let you get 15 for manslaughter. How does the justice, how do people rationalize those things? It doesn't even make sense. It's not even a rational thought.
Well, sentencing in America has never made sense. So, you know, for our kids, I promise you this. I promise you this. While there are absolutely white kids and white men and women in prison, we know the numbers are far and few between. And I promise you that the same armed robberies, the same drugs, the same violence, the same shit has happened, and somebody found grace for their own. That's they found grace for their own.
They always do.
And so please, anyway, I lose faith in people every now and then. It comes back, but I lose it.
No, I do too. I just get so confused just looking, you know, because my major reason for posting it was actually giving a warning to kids, letting them know what's going on. Like, this is what they'll do to you. Like, you out here, you running around doing this, they're gonna roof you. You know, they don't give a damn about you. You know, and so and I understood that, but just see how many of our people that was like, that's good for him. That's right. Lock him up. He ain't no good anyway. I blame his mama. And I'm just like, damn, we don't have any level, just for a child whose frontal lobe is not even developed. The shit that I was doing at 15, I don't even understand. Like, when I sit there and think about shit I done at 15, I'm like, there's no way that I would have even remotely did some shit like that 5 years later. You know what I'm saying? So when we as grown people actually take ourselves out of our own reality to where we can't look back and say, damn, when I did a lot of dumb shit at 14 and 15. I did dumb shit at 19 and 20. You know, when we can't say that, and we wishing all of that shit on somebody 15 because we were able to either rise above it, get away with the shit we did, nobody caught us, all that. Like, it's so crazy to me. The mind state that we deal with is just fucked up. But like you said, that's who we are.
It is.
And with that said, you know, another brilliant episode. Shout out to Dr. Harper and his insight on DEI. we definitely got to pay attention to that because
make sure we say DEI means diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is generally a practice in corporations and in education.
yes,
So
shit that they try to pacify us with. They wanted to pacify us. Everybody had a DEI job during the George Floyd murder. Everybody, we're gonna hire everybody had the
but
best.
they also hire people that a lot of them are not even qualified for the role.
Exactly. They did everything to just want to appease everybody. But now, they don't care if it's, diversity, equity, inclusion no more. Fuck y'all. We going for Trump. We got DeSantis.
Stop it.
We want, that's what I'm telling you. That's like, fuck all that. We going back to shit. Make America great again. America was great when it wasn't no DEI. That's how they feel. And that's what we are right now. So the reality of the situation, man, we got to gear up and buckle up, man. So with that said, man, another episode, brilliant episode. I'm not going to always be right. Tamika D. Mallory's not going to always be wrong, but we will both always, and I mean always, be authentic. That's how we own it. That's how we own it.